I wanted to tell you, I wanted to share some important details that you're unaware of. I want you to listen, I want you to care. I'll choke to death if I don't clear the air. It's not a secret that I obsess, and then I get angry, and then I get stressed. And you can't imagine, and you can't compare. You've no frame of reference, and then you get scared. I'm doing my best to help make you see that it's not your fault when I beg and I plead. It's much easier just to go back to sleep, but we gotta find a place to start because I'm falling apart.
Sometimes I can't even trust myself.
We went to a Trump rally disguised as what we thought were clearly satirical characters.
You should be nervous standing next to me right now. I gotta be extra careful. I gotta look in the mirror every day when I wake up and make sure don't do nothing stupid.
But what happened to us completely changed our perspective of Trump supporters. This was during the beginning of Trump's rise, when nobody was really taking him seriously, and all we were seeing were his insane sound bites on television and violent beatings at his rallies. So we went expecting the worst, but all of us were pretty surprised to see how loving and good intentioned these people were.
Trump, we support his message. Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you very much, brother.
Which made the whole thing all the more surreal, and when we went back to edit the footage, we stopped finding it funny. Look, if you voted for Trump or you're planning on it, please watch the rest of this video. We want to reach out to you.
I'm really glad they made this, and I want to reach out to them in return. I think it's important to, point these things out step by step, how they have manipulated data and how they're using the same old liberal progressive topics to incite fear in Republican voters. Now, they're claiming Republican voters or Republican candidates are inciting the fear. I disagree. It's these people going to Trump rallies, starting shit, riling people up, causing problems, and then they are surprised when they get it? Well, anyway, let me respond to the facts, because a lot of these were sober, well thought out, calm points that they make, but their data is wrong. Let's just go through this step by step.
We got to get that wall on the border,
right?
For sure, on the border,
not
between us.
Not between us. I like that.
Look, Mexicans, they're not your enemies. The only reason they're coming here is because our free trade deals destroy their economy.
It is also important to point out that our welfare system accommodates anybody who comes over our border, whether they have an ID, whether they're legal, whether they have gone through their citizenship process or not. Free money, free education, free child care, free food, free rent assistance. It's endless.
And our failed drug war is responsible for a conflict that's killed more civilians than the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. You would try to get the fuck out of there too, but they're not the reason you're struggling to pay the bills.
Something that is in what you said about being a democratic socialist is a more international view. But I think if you take global poverty that seriously, it leads you to conclusions that in the US are considered out of political bounds. Things like sharply raising the level of immigration we permit, even up to a level of open borders, about sharply increasing the amount of foreign aid. Open borders.
That's a Koch brothers proposal. The
Really?
idea, of course, that's a right-wing proposal which says essentially there is no United States.
But it would make a lot of the global poor richer, wouldn't it?
And it'd make everybody in America poor. Then you're doing away with the concept of a nation state. And I don't think there's any country in the world which believes in that.
And they're not the reason our country isn't great. Poll after poll, we think the biggest threat to our safety are radical Muslims. You're more likely to die from your furniture, and most terrorist attacks in the United States are carried out by white extremists.
He makes a great point here that the terrorist attacks or the violence in the United States, which is predominantly white, are carried out by white people mostly. This is true, makes sense. Mostly white people, mostly white violence. However, you look at the rates of growth in the Muslim communities, they're going to outnumber everyone else, including Christians, within the next 100 years based on their population growth now. And if we are in majority-led Muslim-type states where Sharia law is the law of the land, you just have to compare it to places like Saudi Arabia, where they are a Muslim nation state, and they have almost 3 times the executions we have in the United States, and they have 1/10 of the population. We have roughly 300 million people, a little over 300 million people. We have about 33 executions a year on average. In the Muslim state of Saudi Arabia, they have about 90 executions a year, and they carry them out via Sharia means, via Sharia law, where people get their head cut off. Now, I would hate to be in a Muslim state where the Muslims are the majority. Just look at their laws in the Quran.
But we've been conditioned to fear.
We're at Terror Alert Orange, which means something might go down somewhere in some way at some point in time. So look sharp!
And deprived the wisdom to understand that the war on terror conveniently has no end.
Come on, fire!
It's a cycle of death exploited by profiteers and is justifying the shredding of our constitutional rights. The president can now kill American citizens and lock them up indefinitely without a trial. We've been at war 90% of our history and our military bases cover the globe. The big government you should fear is the one that needs to be fed with blood. If you support our troops, don't send them to war. And you know the history of African Americans in this country, and you don't really believe in this myth of makers and takers.
I realized that I was wrong.
Besides, most recipients of food stamps are white.
Here he goes with more race baiting. Now, he's saying that most of the people on welfare are white. It's also similar to saying most of the people who drive on the freeways are white. Yes, we happen to live in a nation that the majority of people are white.
And the biggest welfare queens by far are Walmart and McDonald's.
Now here he is feeding into more fear. What he's saying is wrong. Walmart and McDonald's and places like those actually give higher wages so that it will bankrupt their competition and run their competition out of business so that they can monopolize on the market. I'll give you a few references here.
If we don't raise the minimum wage, we can keep paying the salaries of their employees for them.
Raising the minimum wage actually has negative consequences for our economy. He talks about people going overseas for their business and their employees. Well, raising the minimum wage, raising regulations, raising taxes does all of that. If you compare our taxes, our corporate tax rate is 39.2% in the United States. In Denmark, for example, it's only 22%. The difference between our socialism and other people's socialism is that other socialism doesn't punish wealth, it invites wealth and encourages it by lowering taxes and opening up opportunities for businesses.
And are the Chinese taking our jobs? Well, yes, but it's not China's fault that the corporations we've created and dedicated our lives to and subsidized and allowed to avoid paying taxes are leaving us for higher profits. They have no allegiance to America, and they're actively working to rob you of your voice in government. Politicians and the media, they don't fight for you anymore, and you have every right to be angry.
This right here is very important. Now, when we talk about the loopholes and the tax breaks that businesses get, very few businesses get those, just those who are associated and intertwined with politicians, basically. The basic solution is to close those loopholes, something like Rand Paul proposed with a flat tax. People pay 15%, no loopholes, period, end of story. If you look at places like Denmark and Norway and those socialist countries in Scandinavia, they have very low tax rates for corporations and very high tax rates for individuals. Individuals in Denmark pay about 62% of their income in taxes. Corporations pay 22%. Does it work? Well, everybody keeps pointing to those Scandinavian countries and saying that it does. You know, if we look before 1913 in our country, there was no income tax, yet we had more prosperity than almost any country. We had fewer people in poverty, and we had a bigger, much stronger middle class with no income tax. Yes, we had emergency services, roads, bridges, and charity, just no income tax and very little debt, almost non-existent debt. That was before income tax.
But the Trump phenomenon has nothing to do with Trump. He's a reminder that we fall victim to age-old tactics time and again because we have historical amnesia. Make America great again. It resonates with so many of us because the vast majority of Americans are worse off than they were. Wages have declined. Inequality is worse than ever. The 400 richest people in this country have more wealth than 60% of Americans. And Donald Trump is one of those 400.
I'm not using the lobbyists. I'm not using donors. I don't care.
He doesn't need to be bought out by lobbyists to have the same interests as our real enemies, who hide safely behind the anonymity of the corporate state. They exhaust our resources, brainwash us, pollute our air, food, and water, gamble our life savings while sitting in skyscrapers, plotting complex ways to become richer at the expense of us. And they laugh. They laugh while we blame each other. The only institutions which provide context for our suffering are straddling an entire generation in $1 trillion of debt. We're punishing our children for trying to learn how to undo our negligence. Listen, I know gays and abortions are hardline issues for some, but everything you hope Trump is can be found in another candidate. And yeah, I know the years of conditioning to hate the word socialism are making you feel very uncomfortable right now, but we've been lied to. Trickle-down Reaganomics, deregulation, neoliberalism, it's all bullshit. It ends in a bubble while opportunists like Trump walk away rich. He spent his career demeaning people and lying. He's a caricature of the worst aspects of America's collective ego, and he's fooling you. Your anger is legitimate, but it's misdirected. If we want to make America great, we can't do it by building a wall or by dropping bombs. We have to do it by caring about each other as much as we care about ourselves. That's when we'll be great. That's when we can be honest about solving our collective problems. I'll never forget sitting in the rally and looking at everybody and realizing these people are just like me. These are my neighbors. They have the same fears and the same desire for love and security. How did we get this far? How have we become so detached, so alienated from each other and from the truth? We need to start having a conversation. It's our duty, and we can't call each other fascists and racists and lefties. We have to talk as Americans. We all want the best for this country, right? We want the best for our children. Well, let's talk.
I wanted to tell you, I wanted to share some important details that you're unaware of. I want you to listen, I want you to care. I'll choke to death if I don't clear the air. It's not a secret that I obsess, and then I get angry, and then I get stressed. And you can't imagine, and you can't compare. You've no frame of reference, and then you get scared. I'm doing my best to help make you see that it's not your fault when I beg and I plead. It's much easier just to go back to sleep, but we gotta find a place to start because I'm falling apart.